But we touched on inability and understanding that we don't have within ourselves the skills necessary or the wisdom necessary on our own, right, to parent the way that God wants us to be able to do that. So we need to rely on Him, and God gives us grace to get through that and to parent the way that He wants us to. So we're going to touch a little bit more on that today, maybe from a different angle, our inability. But just to kind of rehash some of the things we talked about the ownership versus ambassadorship, parenting style, parenting them in a way that they belong to you, or parenting them in a way that you're representative of the Lord to your children. And how just your view on that or perspective on that will change how you interact with your children. It'll change how you raise them and how you discipline them, how you teach them. All those things will be impacted based on if you view them as yours, as a belonging, or if you view them as something you're representing the Lord to. Then we talked about our calling, we talked about grace, we talked about the law last week, and then this week talking about our inability. And that's just recognizing that we're unable to do what we're supposed to do to be good parenting on our own. To be good parenting, to do good parenting, right? We need the Lord's involvement. And it's so easy for us to just default to doing our best or what we've been taught or how we were raised or what just works, right? What we've kind of been defaulted to based on the situation that we're in with the children that we have. The situations that come up, the things that are required of us, the reactions that are required of us, and we just kind of default eventually into maybe the easiest path, and that's not always the best way to go. And we're going to go through some examples on some ways that if we just kind of default parenting, in some ways, and why those aren't the ways that are how the Lord would have us do that. So Ephesians chapter 3, verse 20 says, "Now unto Him that is able to do exceeding abundantly above all that we ask or think, according to the power that worketh in us." So today we're going to talk about the power we have with our children, our power to change, to make impacts, and understanding that verse is saying it's not our power that changes anybody, right? Our spouse, our kids, our friends, the lost you witness to. Your power or what you say, what you do does not do the changing, right? You're a tool that the Lord uses who has the power. As that verse says, He's the one that has the power to actually make change. And so we're going to apply that to our children specifically because as your kids grow up, if you have kids, as they grow, there are a lot of things you're going to want to change about them. You're going to want to change their behaviors. You're going to want to change their thought processes. You're going to just want to change who they are sometimes completely. Because some days you're just be like, I just need you to be a different person because everything you're doing is just either getting on my nerves or just driving everybody else around you crazy or just wrong, right? Just being those kids when they have those days where they're just always getting in trouble, right? When they're little and it's just they're always getting to everything or they're just whining all the time, right? And you just want to change them to be different. And understanding that we don't have the power to change that. We don't have the parental power to change anybody and our kids specifically. So getting into our inability, we need power from the source, right? That's the Lord. We need His power to change. We're His tools to implement some of the changes that He wants to happen. But we in ourselves, as their mom and dads, are not going to change them physically, mentally, spiritually. We don't have the power to do that. So again, recognizing what you're unable to do is essential to good parenting. So if we are to be the tools God has designed us to be, we must understand we don't have power to change them, right? And again, that goes back to ownership parenting versus ambassadorship, representing the Lord, or they're my kids. I have the responsibility to change them. I have the responsibility to make them be who I want them to be, right? And understanding we don't possess that. We don't possess that power to do that. And if we're unable to be the tools He wants us to be, we're fighting a losing battle, right? And they may turn out well, and we all have moments in our parenting where we fight that losing battle, where we fight it within our power. It's a natural way to do things, but we have to look at it in a different way. Parenting it's not about exercising power to change our kids, right? And again, this is every day that you have children. You have an opportunity to use your authority that God does give you as parents to implement change, and how you do that, and the way with which you look at that. I mean, we speak for myself. Often I remove the Lord from my parenting in the fact that I got to handle the situation right now, and it requires my attention, and I just act or just do or don't do, and I don't even get the Lord involved. Right? I mean, and it's something I have to remind myself every day as I raise kids, to pray that God helps me as a dad today to be the dad that he wants me to be in every situation that comes up. And some days nothing bad comes out. Some days there's good things that you can, again, we talked about this too, all the little mundane moments, every opportunity that you have as a mom and dad to point your kids to the Lord. And it's in the small, mundane things that don't seem like big situations that we need to take advantage of those opportunities. And how often do I miss them? Do I let them go by without taking that opportunity to point them to God, or bring God into the conversation or the situation? Sometimes it's just me disciplining. Stop touching your brother. Stop making faces at your sister. Enough. Right? In that situation, it's mundane, it's dumb, and you're just like, shut up, right? But you don't say that because saying shut up is bad. But you just want them to leave each other alone and to be good and to not get on each other's nerves, because when they get on each other's nerves, they get on your nerves. And then you're short. And then you yell at your wife when she gets in the car, right? And all those little things. And those moments, how can you use that situation to teach about the Lord, to teach how to be kind, to teach how to treat each other? Right? And how many times we let those opportunities go because we just want them to stop. And that's what we're talking about here. Not exercising the power that you might feel like you have to change something, but to always point them to the Lord who does have the power. So parenting is not about exercising power. Parenting is about humble faithfulness and participating in God's work for change for the sake of our kids. So again, it's just perspective, right? It's how you look at how things are done. Are you looking at it as if it's your responsibility to make them behave, to make them grow up to not be jerks, right? Or is it your responsibility to take what the Lord wants for them and instill that into them, and to show them what God can do for them, not because you want it to be, because he wants it to be, and so that they understand that. It's not just mom and dad that are telling me to be nice to my sister. I need to be nice to my sister because what does God say about it? That matters. If it only because mom and dad say it, well, that's only going to last a little while. And we'll talk about that here in a second. Because we often fall into that delusion thinking over and over again that we have the power, right? If we just speak a little louder, stand a little closer, make a threat a little bit scarier or the punishment more severe, then the change will happen, right? If we just get louder, I'm serious this time, if we just get in their face more or make the punishment more severe this time, then they'll know. And we fall into that trap, right? And then if change still doesn't happen, then we tend to bring it on even stronger the next time, right? And we get into this cycle of just you trying as a parent to exert your authority in a way that you're trying to change them on the outside, change the behavior, not looking at where the change really comes from, and that's in their heart. That's in their understanding of their position with the Lord. You can change behavior. We all know that. We can change behavior with a lot of different tactics. But that kind of behavior that just changes on the outside is only temporary. It's only going to last so long. We need to find a way to get to the heart of the child individually, right? To make actually lasting changes that the Lord wants to instill in them. We have no power to change the child's heart. Only the Lord has power to do that. Now we can be a tool, right? And we can give grace and we can show them the law and we can fulfill our calling by showing them God's love for them and get to their heart in that way. And how we handle and how we parent can get to their heart as well, right? You can think about the parents you had or have. And some of the successes that they did, right? You're all in church. That you can attribute that to them probably to some degree. And maybe some failures that they had, right? Some of us might have had parents that chewed us out, that like we were scared of. I know my dad sometimes, some of you have seen my dad. He had a temper. And there were times where it's like, Dad's mad, don't look at him. Not that you were fearful physically, but like he could yell, and he was scary. And there were times that you're just don't look at dad, eggshells, right? Walking on eggshells around dad. Maybe you had a mom or a dad that was that way. And I'll tell you that, and he would admit that is not a good way to parent. If your kids are terrified of you and they're walking on eggshells for any situation, right? We're doing it under our own power. We're trying to control something, control the situation, control whatever you're in, the child in that moment. That is not going to get to any kid's heart. That's only going to instill fear. It's only going to instill distance, right? Lack of communication. There's a lot of bad things that will come from that. So as parents, that we want to be tools, we want to be his instruments for change, meaning that we need to be willing to let go of our power, our human power parenting habits. Not removal of authority, right? You still have the authority because God gives that to you, but to exercise your authority as the one that represents the Lord, not the one who's the buck stops with me. I'm the authority. I have the power. So using parental authority that submits to God's power. That's what we want to. That's how we want to parent. So there are a few tools that get used. Let's see here. So I said at the start, God has given parents the authority for the work of change, but only he has the power to make that happen. We often assume that we have the power and therefore the responsibility to force change upon them. Right? When you assume you're the one that has the power, you assume the responsibility to make the change happen. And when we do that, we're just enforcing change on a behavior. We're not getting to the heart of the situation. We're just forcing change on a behavior, and that will only last so long. So we want to use our authority to force change in behavior. Again, alone is only temporary. Instead, we want to use the authority God gives us to submit to the one that can change them. And that means praying for your kids. It means if you're going through a tough season with any one of your children at any given time, we should be praying for them. And we should be praying for them all the time. It's easy to not pray for your kids by name every day, right? And you kind of just, it's life. You just gloss over some of those natural given things that are just, you have your kids. They're there. This is life. You're in the middle of it. But praying for them, praying for their hearts as they grow, praying for tenderness, praying for their understanding of what the Lord wants from them. And if you go through a tough season with a child, and we all do, they're humans, right? They sin. They have tough times. They go through struggles. And when we go through that as a parent and you want to help them get through those things, praying for them even more in those situations, because the only one that's going to help them see the truth is God. You can show them, you can give them everything the Lord has given you, but God is the one that gets to their heart. And so prayer is very powerful, and obviously as a Christian we know that. But sometimes I think we know that, but we don't practice it. So pray for your kids. Understand God has the power to change them. So some of the ways that we use our power tools, as we'll put it here, we parent with fear sometimes, and I've done this, right? We use fear to make change, right? We instill fear in what might happen if they don't obey, consequences, right? Punishments, things that instill them. We want them to change. We want them to stop doing something or start doing something. And we use that power. And the problem with the power, or the reason we use threats, is because they are effective, especially when they're smaller, right? The smaller kids instill, and it may not be like you're this giant monster getting in their face and screaming, yelling at them. It doesn't have to be aggressive fear in that way, but just instilling them a fear in the punishment for disobedience, or a grounding, something taking away something from them. Whatever threats you want to put out there as parents, we use them. We use threats, we use that, and that is fear that we use with our kids. And the reason that it is temporarily effective, especially as they're younger, is because you're a full-grown adult, and they're little hobbit-sized children, right? They're tiny. And big people are scary to hobbits. I mean, hobbits say that all the time. Big people are scary. You stay away from them. And when we parent that way, it's effective because they're little, right? And you're a threatening presence. And if you do use the loud voice, and the red face and the bulging eyes and the pointed finger, I mean, if your boss did that to you, right, at work, that's threatening. That's fearful. It might even work for a while, right? We can do things to make our children afraid to cross us, like I mentioned, walking on eggshells. If they know dad's in a bad mood, or they know that they've disobeyed too many times and now dad's mad or mom's upset, The mom voice has come out too many times today. They're scared. And so they either avoid you altogether, or they enclose. There's a lot of options of what they'll be or how they'll respond. But having a child who's afraid to cross us, right, to do the right thing. So don't disobey because mom or dad are going to get mad, or your gaming time will be taken away, or your free time will be taken away, or your car will be taken away, right? Don't be afraid. Don't do what I say, or do what I say, or else this happens. The problem with having a child that is that way versus a child who's motivated because internally they know they've done wrong. They know what is right. They know that they did wrong, and they confessed it to God, and they want his help to change. There's a big difference. And a child that just wants to behave a certain way so mom or dad don't do this versus I have sinned, I know I did wrong, and I want to do right, and I know I need God's help to make me do right, to help me do right. Those are different responses. And when we parent from fear and having that fearful child, they're just wanting to change their behavior to make the angry parent go away. Right? If you're at work and the boss gets in your face like that, might change your behavior in that moment to make them leave. Just fine, I'll do it. Just go away. Leave me alone. I'll stop this. I'll do this. Whatever you need. If that's how we parent consistently, your child will eventually be that way. They'll do whatever you want them to do just to stop whatever it is that you're doing, until the fact that they're no longer little hobbit-sized children, but now all of a sudden they're your intellectual, if you can say it, peer or superior, or they're your physical peer, right? When they're no longer half your size, but they're as tall as you or taller than you, and now they're mentally mature. Threats and fear doesn't usually work very well with those children, right? Especially if it's been used throughout their childhood. They were probably resentful of it, and they're probably going to push back because now they can. Now they have the physical ability and the mental ability to push back. And if they are good kids and they don't want to push back in that way, they'll just figure out ways to do it without you knowing. Then they'll figure out how to get around the rules and how to disobey and how to do those things where you don't know, so there are no threats. That's not how we want to parent, right? We don't want to force our kids into that situation or put ourselves into that situation where we've put all the responsibility on ourselves and made trying to force behavioral change, right? External threats are not gonna work. And change from a fearful child, that might not be change at all, right? Not a heartful change, just a behavioral change. Just a child trying to avoid consequences or threats. So external threats without a heart connection will fail to change our sons and daughters, right? We may get the result we want from threatening or from consequences or punishments that may come if they don't do or do what we're telling them not to do, but that doesn't guarantee their heart will change. So if we only parent from that, use that tool of fear, that's we're missing a big portion of it. And again, when they grow older, it's not going to work nearly as well as it does when they're little. So there's value to having a respect of their parent and the position that you hold, but if they need to understand you hold the position as parent and the authority because God gives it to you. So when they break a rule that you have given them, they're not breaking your rule. They're sinning against God because they're not obeying, and God told them to obey. We use that verse all the time. Children, obey your parents, right? But they need to understand as children when they disobey, when the consequences do come, because there has to be consequences. You can't just let them break rules, break laws, do whatever they want and get away with it. There has to be consequences, but they have to understand the consequences come because you love them and you want to teach them to do the right thing, and they need to see that they did the wrong thing, and they want in their heart to change and not be that way. But if we're just pushing fear on them all the time and threats, we don't get to the heart. The next tool we use often is a reward tool. Manipulation by holding the carrot stick out, right? Different from God's blessing. God tells us he will bless us if we obey him. That is not the same as this kind of parenting. This kind of parenting says, if you do this, I'll give you that, right? If you do this, then I'll give you this. And it's an easy way out sometimes, and it's kind of, I won't say the lazy way, but it's a default way we can go. And some kids respond to that really well. You can get them to do exactly what you want them to do for a while if you offer them a reward. So in the book I'm reading, he gives an example, and I changed the names because I did. So we have Johnny and Susie. So Johnny makes Susie cry all the time, right? They're brother and sister, and they're always fussing, always fighting. Johnny's older than Susie, and every day he hurts Susie's feelings. He looks at her mean. He trips her. He just antagonizes her nonstop. So mom and dad offer him this drone he's been looking on the internet. Say, if you can be nice to Susie for 4 whole weeks, 1 whole month, no issues with Susie, we'll get you this drone. Right? We'll get you this drone if you can be nice to your sister. You be nice to your sister for 1 whole month, we'll get you this drone. Miraculously, Johnny is like a perfect saint. He's kind. He's nice. His sister never cries the entire month. He's just patient with her. He helps her. He doesn't lose his temper. He doesn't get impatient or frustrated with her the entire month. He's just an angel with his sister. She just can't believe how nice he is. So dad and mom are super proud. He's been a whole month. He's been super good to his sister. So they buy him this drone. Comes. Dad even helps Johnny put it together in the kitchen. Right? And again, all month. Super. They've been like best friends. Right? So puts it together, goes out in the backyard, and mom and dad sit at the kitchen table talking about how proud they are of little Johnny for being a good boy. See, I knew he had it in him. I knew he could do it. We just had to show him that he's capable. And 5 minutes just kind of patting themselves on the back, right? How good and wise they are. 5 minutes later, Susie's screaming in the backyard, and Johnny's chasing her with the drone right over her head, just laughing maniacally through the backyard, chasing Susie with the drone. And obviously, no change has happened. Right? He has been rewarded for something, but he hasn't changed. Johnny hasn't made a change in his heart. He doesn't understand what he did was wrong. He doesn't see his actions as being sinful. He has not sought God and helping him to be a better brother. He just behaved to earn a reward. He did what was asked so that he could get something that he really wanted. And he decided that behaving was worth behaving to get the drone that he wanted to be. So really, Johnny didn't love his sister anymore that month than he did the month before. Johnny just loved Johnny, right? He loved himself, and self-love was the main reason for the change of behavior. It was the reward, but it was because he loves himself and wanted something for himself so much, he was willing to be and pay the price, which was treating his sister properly. So nothing changed in his heart. There's no change in him and all. Actually, mom and dad were teaching Johnny about moral economics, right? If you're willing to behave this certain way, is it worth the prize that you're going to get? He's doing a cost-benefit scenario, right, to each situation. And he'll grow up, if that's how he is parented, he'll grow up looking at life in that way, in every way. It'll be, is my behavior, is me doing this worth what I get for it? And if it isn't, he won't. So the next time you want him to be nice to his sister Susie, what are you going to have to offer him? It's probably going to be bigger than a drone, right? And if he's at 10 years old already and you've already given him a drone for behaving for 1 month, what are you going to? Oh, the escalation there is incredible, right? Johnny just does that analysis, and if he's offered something worth the behavior, he'll give in. But what will happen as he gets older is he'll start negotiating. He'll start negotiating with mom and dad for better rewards, for less time of this, or I don't actually have to do all of this. Make your bed and I'll give you this. Clean your room and you'll get this, right? And he'll start negotiating for different rewards, for different work, for different behaviors. And most likely in this scenario, and if we take it all to the extreme, mom and dad give in to all the rewards and demands that he's got and wants, and no change has been made. You've just taught a kid to be very manipulative and how to get things from people through his whole life. And he may grow up and just be, he's going to have a hard time being the sacrificial giving husband if this is how he grows up. Right? So rewarding them is not going to necessarily change who they are. Changing is learning what's right again, and I said this before, is learning what's right, understanding and confessing where they were wrong as a child, committing to doing it differently, and then seeking help from the Lord on that. And that's where change happens. And none of that happened with Johnny here, right? None of that change happened. Behavior changed, but that was only temporary. It only lasted as long as the ask was to earn something. So nothing changed within him. Like fear, rewards will only produce what you're looking for temporarily. And that's when we do it in our power. When we use our power to try to change without asking the Lord to intervene, without teaching them about the fact that they need to change their hearts, that their outlook and the way they behave and why that needs to, not because you get a drone or not because you're in trouble, but because this is what God wants from us. And for them to fear the Lord in a way that they respect him, and that matters. That matters what God wants from them. Okay? The last part, the last power tool we use is shame or guilt. And again, we've all done it. So this is not me pointing a finger at how badly you are parenting. I've used guilt and shame before too. And your parents probably did it with you. Right? And you can look, I encourage you to look at your childhood and some areas that you look and like, man, I wish it hadn't gone that way, or wish it was different. And then look at the way you're doing it. And make sure that it's not the same, because that's our tendency. Because even the things that were not great in our childhood, we default to those things because that's what we know. But you don't have to do things the way your parents did them just because that's the way it was done. We can do things the way God wants us to do them because that's the way he wants them done. So that means you can change the legacy of parenting in your family. You don't have to repeat the same mistakes. You can do things differently. But guilt and shame used as a tool, right? We say, I never would have dreamed of doing that when I was your age. Wow, you're very bold. Can't believe you would do that. I would never have done that. I would never have said that to my mom when I was your age. Right? Though, and we've all said those things. I've said that to my children. I can't believe you've ever considered behaving that way. In all my years of parenting, whatever, and it could be like a year, in all my years of parenting, I've never seen this happen before. I could never imagine that you would stoop this low to behave in this manner. Do you even understand what you're putting your mom and I through? Right? Those types of statements are to bring guilt and shame towards me, right? Be guilty about how you're making me as the dad feel. So that's bringing horizontal guilt and saying you're causing this grief on me as your parent, or you're causing inconvenience for me, or whatever. That cost me money and now I have to do more because of this. Causing guilt between them and me. And really that kind of shame, parenting is really all about me as a parent. It's selfish. And it's a way to get them to feel bad for what they did and don't do it again because of how you make me feel. That will be effective because no child wants to not please their parents. Every child wants to please their parents. Every child wants their parents to be proud of them. And so using that guilt or that shame will be effective. It will likely have effect and work. But what we as parents want, we want vertical guilt. We want them to see their guilt, not because of our inconvenience or how they make us feel, but because of what God says about right and sin. And so if that guilt is there, it should be towards God. Give them insight to themselves and why they are guilty and as a whole, not because of their specific behavior in that moment. That's just a reflection of who they are inside. Right? We talked about the bowl of water, shaking the bowl of water. What comes out? Water. Because water's inside the bowl. Milk's not coming out of that bowl because there's no milk in it. So when we get agitated or when things happen, only what's inside is what comes out. So when the behavior comes out in their children, in your children, shaming them for that behavior for themselves, for you, it'll work, but it's missing the point of why they do that. They behave that way because it's inside them. The sin is inside them. And so they need to understand the Lord has a problem with sin. And so we are guilty before him. And that's why we want to change. That's why we want to bring that desire for change. Understanding that brings that desire. Again, all children want their parents to be proud. They want to please their parents. They want us to accept and appreciate them. So guilt and shame are temporarily good tools, right? Those tools will work. And shame from a parent can and will cause a relationship strain, though, all the way into adulthood. Again, if that's a way that maybe you were parented, there's probably some relationship strain with your parents, if that's how they parented, right? That they made you feel guilty all the time. And it can exist with you and your parents, and it'll distance those relationships, even into adulthood. And it can affect how you treat your kids, how you respond with your kids. But again, you don't have to continue that legacy of guilt and shame in parenting. It can be changed, right? We need to do the things the way the Lord wants us to do them. And again, that's to instill the understanding of their standing with him, not just with us as their mom and dad, but they're standing with the Lord. So our parenting needs to rise above those things. So our parenting needs to rise above more than just controlling their behavior in this moment. But that often is the most pressing desire for us as parents. Is this moment, right now, the behavior they're exuding needs to be different. And so I will do whatever is necessary or whatever I default to change that. And it might be threats, it might be rewards, it might be guilt, whatever those things are that we look to change their behavior right now. But it's not just about right now. I know today it's about right now. But really, big picture, it's not just about right now. Every day is bigger than just right now. And controlling that behavior in that moment, we need to point them to the Lord. And we talked about this before. Point them to the one that desires their life to matter for him. Right? God has plans for your children. Every single one of them. And he has things he wants them to do. So we want to point through our parenting them to him. And that's where lasting change comes from. Right? It's a lifelong relationship with the Lord. And when we help them build that relationship as children, that's going to strengthen your relationship with them as well. And that's going to change their behavior and change their heart. So we have no ability to do this work of change on our own. Right? We have to recognize our inability to do that on our own so that we rely on the Lord to help us. And we don't default to fear and rewards and guilt. That we want the best for them, and we need his help in order for that to happen. So don't be willing to settle for just control. Don't be willing to settle for just well-behaved children. Right? That's behavior can be temporary. Give yourself to the hard, patient, God-involved process that actually makes change happen. Right? It's quick and easy to control behavior and control it and use your power to do that. It's way more difficult to put in the time and effort and teaching and pointing for the reasons why the behavior needs to change. And sometimes your kids won't get it the first time. Not sometimes, all times. Your kids won't get it the first time. That's why you've got like 18 years to deal with it. Because you, just like Deuteronomy 6 says, you have to talk about it all the time. At the dinner table, after work, on a walk, in the morning, on the way to school. It has to be preached through your life constantly, for years and years and years and years. That's the process to enact actual change, not just behavioral. But the good thing is that God is with you all the time. God is there. That's a daunting thing to do it every day for years and years and years and years and do it right every single time. That's daunting and near impossible to do it is impossible to do on your own. So God is with you, though. He wants what's best for you. He wants what's best for your kids. So allow him to help you, to be the dad and the mom that you're supposed to be that does the hard thing. Not just control, but change in their heart. All right.